All right, today's lesson, second to last lesson. I'm sure you guys are super excited. And it is the start of factoring. All right, we're just going to be factoring by using the distributive property. So it's really just the opposite of distributing. So you're going to look at them like, okay, well, what value did I distribute to both terms or all three terms? So we really need to look for the GCF, greatest common factor. So if I'm looking at 15 and 25, the largest number that each of them are divisible by is 5. So I'm going to put a 5 out front because that's the number that would have been distributed to them. And then we're going to look at our variables. Okay? I have one x there, but x squared means I have two x's because remember it's x times x. So I can't pull out more than I have. Like I can't factor out two of them because this guy has two because this guy here only has one. So the most variables that I can pull out or factor out is one of them. So that's where a 5x comes in. And then I'm going to put my parenthesis, just like if I had that distributive property, and I'm going to do 15 divided by 5 is 3. I had one x, I pulled it out, so I have no other x's there. Keep my plus sign in the middle. 25 divided by 5 is 5. I had two x's. I pulled one out, so I have one x left. And now just look and say, all right, 3 and 5, there's no common factor between those, so we must be finished. See? Factoring's not too bad. All right, if we have more terms, that's fine. Same thing. 12, 24, and 30. First, I noticed a 2, but then I thought, okay, well, that would give me 6, 12, and, oh my gosh, 15. Okay. Which would work, but I think a larger value would be 6, if I'm looking at this correctly. So I'm going to factor out a 6, and hopefully that's the biggest one. And then xy squared, x squared y to the 4th. Well, xy, that's the largest I can pull out because I can't pull any more out. So 12 divided by 6 is 2. I pulled out both x's and y's. 24 divided by 6 is 4. I pulled out the x, so I no longer have an x. There were two y's. I pulled one of them out, so I have one y left. Minus 30 divided by 6 is 5. I had x squared, I pulled one out, so I have x. There was y to the 4th, I pulled one out, so I have y cubed. All right, 2, 4, and 5, they have no other common factors other than 1. And I have no other variables I can factor out. So there you go. All right, pause the video, try the your turn, and then come back and check your answers. All right, for this one, sorry, my pen died. I'm pulling out that entire first term. So we need to make sure we put a 1 there. Please, please, please do not forget that. Okay, if not, you will only end up with 2 terms in your answer if you were to distribute, not 3. All right, I'm going to distribute just to be sure. Okay, it matches. So that was my check, and we are done. Okay. All right. Next part is factoring by grouping. Okay. It says a polynomial can be factored by grouping only if all the following conditions exist. there are 4 or more terms, okay? Terms have common factors, and we're going to group them together. We're going to group them in groups of 2. And there are 2 common factors that are identical or additive inverses of each other. Okay, and you're going to see what all of that means here. So when we factor by grouping, I'm going to look at my terms and say, okay, I could move these around a little bit, but there's no need to do that. So I'm going to group them. Okay, now when we factor by grouping, there is one super important key concept that you cannot forget. There always has to be an addition sign in the middle. So notice how that subtraction or that negative in front of the 2y, I put inside parentheses with the 2y, and I inserted an addition symbol in the middle. Okay, that is super important, guys. Do not forget that. Okay, and then I look at each one of these problems. You can't see me, but I'm covering up the second half after the plus sign with my hand, and I'm just going to concentrate on the first 2 terms. Well, the only thing those first 2 terms have in common are my x. So I'm going to factor an x out, and that's okay if that's all I can factor out. All right, my next 2 terms, they actually have nothing in common to factor out other than they're both negative. So I'm going to factor out a -1 because we always have to factor out something. Even if it's just a positive one, you have to factor something out when you factor by grouping. So when I pull that -1 out, I'm left with a positive 2y plus 7. Now this next part is where you're going to be able to notice if you're doing it right. Look inside each set of parentheses. Do you have the exact same binomial? And our answer is yes. We have 2y plus 7 in both of them. So that means we're doing it right. Since I have that in both of them, I'm going to write that down. So 2y plus 7, because it's like I'm factoring that out again. I'm going to cross them off, and then look what I'm left with, x minus 1. And there's our final answer. Okay. If you needed to double check this, FOIL it back together. See if you get those 4 terms. All right, so take a moment, try this your turn. All right, so there's our final answer for that problem. All right, next example. Again, 4 terms, so I'm going to group them. Oh, this one already has an addition sign in the middle, so that's awesome. Look and see, okay, I have 15 and 3, common factor of GCF is 3, A and AB, so I can only factor out an A, so that leaves me with 5 minus B. 4 and 20, I can pick out a 4 or factor out a 4. That leaves me with B minus 5. Now I'm looking here and I'm like, 5 minus B, oh, B minus 5. They're very similar, but they're just backwards. So anytime that happens, all you have to do is, instead of me factoring out that positive 4, I'm just going to factor out a negative. So that's going to make my -5 become positive, so I'm going to put that first, and my positive b will now become a minus b. Now they match, so I'm going to write that down, so 5 minus b, and then I'm left with 3a minus 4. And again, to double check this or to check your work, FOIL them back together, what you guys did the other day, and make sure it's correct. All right, pause the video, try this your turn, then come back and check. There you go. So hopefully you got y plus 5 times the quantity. negative 2x plus 3. All right, the last thing we are doing today, let's say, yep, just making sure, is the zero product property. All right, so the zero product property says if the product of two factors is 0, then at least one of the factors has to be 0. Okay, so what that means is if I'm multiplying several things together and the answer is 0, at least one of those things has to be 0. Okay, it's the only way. The only way to get 0 as an answer is if one of the terms is 0. So, for example 4, we have to solve each of these equations and then check our solution. So if I'm going to solve this first one, it's already in factored form, so I don't want to FOIL them. Whenever I have something, there could be two factors, like there's a factor. I could have 4 or 5 of them. It doesn't matter. To solve this, I set each term equal to 0 and solve each of them for x. So this one's pretty easy. I just have to add 2 to both sides. So we get x is equal to 2. And over here I have to add 1. So 4x equals a positive 1. And divide both sides by 4, so x is 1/4. So we have two different answers, which is fine. We have x is equal to 2 and x is equal to 1/4. And this right here is going to help us when we are solving our trinomials in the next lesson. Okay? Part B. I see my y squared term is over here, and I prefer that to remain positive, so I'm going to subtract 4y from both sides. So don't forget, I get 0 equals 12y squared minus 4y. All right, I only have two terms. I notice that they both have a y in common and a 4, so I'm going to factor it. So I'm going to factor out a 4y. That leaves me with a 3y minus 1. And now that that expression is factored, I'm going to set each factor equal to 0 and then solve. So divide both sides by 4. 0 divided by 4 is 0. Over here, add 1. Divide both sides by 3. And we get 1/3. Okay. So you guys just have, I believe, 3 more problems for your turns. So pause the video, try them, and then come back and double check. All right, so hopefully you guys found those 3 problems pretty easy. I know we covered a lot here today, so if you have questions, just let me know, and then you are on your way to starting your practice.